Hello everyone, myself Deepak Gupta logging again on this platform of College Dekho Learn to continue our journey on various topics under GST, and today we will understand the meaning of the word related party and how can we say the related party transactions are important for the calculation of value of supply under GST. So as per our last session where we discussed about the word transaction value. This was our last session, transaction value under section 15 subsection 1 of the CGST Act, which you can always go to our channel College Dekho Learn and look for the sessions by Deepak Gupta and look for the name transaction value, where we discussed that whenever there is a supplier making a taxable supply to the recipient under the forward charge mechanism, then this supply has to be valued, because whatever is the value of supply, that value will be subjected to GST, and this value can be transaction value with the basic assumptions that these two parties, that is the supplier and the recipient, are non-related parties. The first and foremost requirement where the transaction value is used as the value of supply is that the supplier and the recipient has to be non-related parties. In addition to this basic requirement, the other primary requirements can be that this supply has been made in furtherance of the business, or the goods or services covered under the supply will be used in the furtherance or use of the business. And thirdly, when the supply is made, then price is the sole consideration. So all these basic requirements were discussed in that earlier session, and the focus in at the moment is on the concept that this supplier and this recipient has to be non-related parties. Only then the transaction value under section 15 subsection 1 will be deemed as the value of supply. So the point arises that if somehow this supplier and this recipient are related parties, so question will be, what are actually related parties? So when we define who are a related party, then we can always say that such defined related party and any transaction between two will be known as related party transactions. And in those cases, that is, if we are able to underline the meaning of the word related party, we will term those transactions as RPT, related party transactions. And in this case, the value of supply will not be the transaction value, but it will be as per the schedule 4 of the CGST rules and not the transaction value. So there are two things, that whenever there is a supplier and the recipient, we first have to ascertain whether they are non-related party or whether they are related party. Because if they are not related party, then we go through the fund of transaction value as discussed earlier. But if they are related party, then this concept transaction value will not be applicable. So we have to stress on this concept of related party. So what are related parties has been clearly defined under the CGST Act, and we will discuss that the following are deemed as related party, and therefore the transaction of supply, transaction of goods and services between such will be known as related party transactions. So we will discuss it one by one, and you can always revise them from any of the books that you are using. Okay? So the first and foremost thing is that what is the point is that the persons are employees or officers, ठीक है, of each other's business. यानी कि मिस्टर ए और मिस्टर बी, अगर उनमें से एक सप्लायर है, यानी कि मिस्टर ए और मिस्टर बी, इनमें से एक सप्लायर है, एक रेसिपिएंट है, इनके बीच में ट्रांजैक्शन हुई, तो ये इसकी फर्म में जॉब कर रहा है और ये इसकी फर्म में जॉब कर रहा है, तो बोथ आर एम्प्लॉयज ऑफ वन अनदर्स बिजनेस। और अगर एक दूसरे के बिजनेस में एम्प्लॉयज हैं, तो इन दोनों के बीच में अगर कोई ट्रांजैक्शन हो रही है, देन यानी कि ये इसका एम्प्लॉय है और ये इसका एम्प्लॉय है, देन दे विल बी नोन एज आरपी एंड द ट्रांजैक्शन विल बी नोन एज आरपीटी, रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजैक्शन, एंड इट विल नॉट बी कवर्ड, it will not be covered under the transaction value section 15 subsection 1. ठीक है. Second case is that the supplier and the recipient, that is the persons are legally recognized partners. What it implies that Mr. A and Mr. B have entered into a partnership agreement. So there is a live partnership deed between the two. इन दोनों के बीच में एक लाइव पार्टनरशिप डीड है, ठीक है, इन दोनों के बीच में एक लाइव पार्टनरशिप डीड है, और उस पार्टनरशिप डीड के अकॉर्डिंग ये दोनों एक्टिव पार्टनर्स हैं। और अगर ये आपस के एक्टिव पार्टनर्स आपस में एक दूसरे के साथ कोई सप्लाई करते हैं, so that supply will be known as related party transaction and will not be covered by the transaction value. It means Mr. A and Mr. B are legally recognized active partners, and hence the transaction between the two, therefore the transaction between the two will be deemed as related party transaction. So now the third case that is possible is that there is an employee there is an employer-employee relationship. There is an employer-employee relationship between supplier एंड रेसिपिएंट, यानी कि जो मिस्टर ए और मिस्टर बी हैं, जिनके बीच में ये सप्लाई है, इनमें से कोई एक एम्प्लॉयर है और एक एम्प्लॉई है। तो फर्स्ट केस में दोनों एक दूसरे के एम्प्लॉई थे और दोनों एक दूसरे के एम्प्लॉयर थे। यहाँ पर एक एम्प्लॉयर है, एक एम्प्लॉई है, यानी कि ये इसके पास नौकरी कर रहा है एज पर the contract of employment. So we presume that this supply will be the related party transaction. So before we move on, we have to understand this, that the whole process of taxation presumes that whenever there is a transaction between two people who are not related in any way, then they will do that transaction on a value which is not affected by their personal relationship. So I'm not saying that they cannot give discount to each other, but whatever is the transaction value, whatever is the price that has been paid by one person to another person, being the two parties being unrelated, then that is a genuine price which is not affected by any of their personal relationship. Such price is what you call arm length price. So we use this word arm's length price, which says that this is normally the price of supply, the value of the supply when the two parties are related. And this whole funda of RPT comes into play, that if the two parties are somehow related in any of the manner that we are going to discuss, for example, the three cases we have discussed, then their value of the supply, that is the price at which they are making this transfer of goods or services, may be affected by their personal relationship, which will adversely affect the amount of GST to be collected by the government. So In these related party transactions, the government tries to match the price as per the arm length price. So, the transaction between the related parties has to be at a price which is minimum of the arm length price. If that is the case, then there is no problem. RPT and non-RPT will be similar in taxation purposes, because even the parties are related, the value of supply has taken the precautions of arm length price. But if that is not the case, then there has to be the valuation as per schedule 4 of the CGST rules. So that valuation is normally not under undergraduate level. Whenever people are doing CA final, then normally such kind of things will be done. That is not the prerogative here. That is why we are not focusing on how the valuation of related party transaction will be done. Our scenario here is only who are related parties which are not covered, that is their value won't be calculated under section 15.1, that is the transaction value. So I hope you have now understood the funda. So I will go on with the listing the various cases which will be deemed as related parties. I'm sorry. So the fourth case here will be that if a third party here will denote a person who is not a party to the transaction, that is, who is neither a supplier nor a recipient. The case is the third party controls or owns, third party controls or owns at least 25%, that is more than equal to 25% stake. ठीक है, in both of them, that is the recipient, that is the supplier. Means अगर एक सप्लायर ए है, एक रेसिपेंट बी है, इनके बीच में कोई सप्लाई हुई और मिस्टर एक्स कि इस कंपनी के अंदर 30% शेयर्स हैं, इस कंपनी के अंदर 25% शेयर्स हैं, तो ये एक्स जो है ये ए और बी दोनों को एटलीस्ट 25% से होल्ड कर रहा है. तो बिकॉज ए होल्ड्स मोर बोथ ए एंड बी टू द एक्सटेंट ऑफ मिनिमम 25%, देयरफॉर दिस पार्टी ए एंड बी विल बी डीम्ड एज रिलेटेड पार्टी थ्रू their single ownership pattern by Mr. X. And that again the scenario which we have discussed, that we will cover their price with the arm length price. Then the fifth case can be that instead of the third party, one party controls the other party. यानी कि सप्लायर रेसिपेंट को कंट्रोल कर रहा है, ये रेसिपेंट जो है वो सप्लायर को कंट्रोल कर रहा है. एंड दिस कंट्रोल कैन आइदर बी डायरेक्टली, अब कंट्रोल का मतलब है कि आप उनके सारे डिसीजन मेकिंग को अफेक्ट कर रहे हो, तो डायरेक्टली भी कंट्रोल कर सकते हो, या जिनके पास कंट्रोल है आपकी कंपनी का दूसरे की कंपनी का, आप उन्हें कंट्रोल करते हो. तो ये सप्लायर ए है, सप्लायर बी है, या तो ये इसको कंट्रोल कर रहा है या ये इसको कंट्रोल कर रहा है. और ये कंट्रोल डायरेक्टली भी हो सकता है और इनडायरेक्टली भी हो सकता है. तो अगर ये एक दूसरे को कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं तो वी प्रेज्यूम कि इफेक्टिवली एक बंदा अपने आप को गुड्स बेच रहा है. सो वी विल हैव टू गो थ्रू द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ आर्म लेंथ प्राइस. ठीक है. देन जो यहाँ फंडा था 25% ओनरशिप का, वही फंडे को फिफ्थ से मैच करके हमने ये बना दिया कि जो थर्ड पार्टी है, जैसे कि ऊपर वाले केस में 25% था, थर्ड पार्टी कंट्रोल्स बोथ सप्लायर एज वेल एज द रेसिपिएंट. तो वहाँ 25% था. कंट्रोल को डेफिनेशन बड़ी है, जिसमें शेयर होल्डिंग में 51% हो सकता है, या डायरेक्टर्स का अपॉइंटमेंट कंट्रोल हो सकता है. तो वो डिपेंड करता है कि किस तरह का ओनरशिप पैटर्न है. बट नॉर्मली अगर हम कंपनी के एंगल से चले तो होल्डिंग और सब्सिडरी का कॉन्सेप्ट कंट्रोल आ सकता है. तो अगर एक पार्टी दोनों कंपनियों को होल्ड करती है तो कंट्रोलिंग अथॉरिटी हो गई. डायरेक्टर्स की अपॉइंटमेंट कंट्रोल करती है तो वो कंट्रोलिंग अथॉरिटी हो गई. तो अगर एक दूसरे को कर रहे हैं तो भी रिलेटेड पार्टी है, और एक पार्टी दोनों को कर रहा है तब भी वो पार्टीज आपस में रिलेटेड पार्टी हो जाएंगी एंड द ट्रांजैक्शन विल बिकम द रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजैक्शन। इसका रिवर्स ये हो सकता है कि यहाँ थर्ड पार्टी इन दोनों को कंट्रोल कर रही थी, अब हम कह रहे हैं कि सप्लायर प्लस रेसिपिएंट टुगेदर दोनों मिलकर कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं, टुगेदर कंट्रोल्स अ थर्ड पार्टी। यानी कि ऊपर वाले केस से अपोजिट है, यहाँ थर्ड पार्टी दोनों को कंट्रोल कर रही है और ये दोनों मिलकर थर्ड पार्टी को कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं। तो इनके बीच में जो ये सप्लाई है, ये सप्लाई will become related party transaction because they are presumed to have common interests, because they jointly control any third party। ठीक है। नाउ जो एक केस है उसमें क्या है कि बोथ पार्टीज आर फैमिली मेंबर्स। तो अगर फैमिली मेंबर्स हैं तो ये तो बहुत ओल्ड और सिंपल कॉन्सेप्ट है जो हर आदमी समझता है कि अगर एक ही फैमिली के मेंबर है तो वो आपस में रिलेटेड है, विच विल ऑलवेज अफेक्ट देयर रिलेशनशिप एज पर द वैल्यू ऑफ द सप्लाई। सो दैट इज व्हाई वी आर सेइंग that if both the parties they belong to the same family, so this family can be undertaken from the point of view of the HUF, or normally the family includes the person's self, his spouse, his dependent parents, brothers and sisters and children। ठीक है। and the last case could have been कि one person जो party to the deal है is the pure agent, is the sole agent, इकलौता agent of another party। यानी कि एग्जाम्पल के तौर पर अगर ये मिस्टर ए है तो मिस्टर ए ने मिस्टर बी को अपना सोल एजेंट अपॉइंट किया हुआ और बी यहाँ पर आके गुड्स बेचता है, सेल्स गुड्स ऑफ ए। तो बी क्योंकि ए का प्योर एजेंट है, सोल एजेंट है, ऑथराइज एजेंट है, सोल डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर है, इसलिए बी ए के भी यहाँ पे सारे माल बेच रहा है। तो जब ए ने बी को गुड्स बेचे तो ये जो ट्रांजैक्शन है ये रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजैक्शन है, बिकॉज बी इज द सोल एजेंट ऑफ ए एंड दैट इज व्हाई ए एंड बी विल बी डीम्ड एज related parties। This A and B will be deemed as related parties। So we have to understand that as per the GST Act, these 9 cases, I again repeat, one person who is the pure agent of the another, then this person and the pure agent will be deemed as related party। If the buyer and the seller, or we should say the supplier and the recipient, they both are the members of the same family, then such buyer and seller, that is the such supplier and recipient, will be deemed as the related party। Or if both supplier and recipient jointly controls a third party, then they will be deemed as related party। Or if one party controls both the supplier and the recipient, then even the party third is involved, but because supplier and recipient are controlled by common party, this two party, supplier and recipient, will be deemed as related party। Similarly, when one party, that is the supplier, controls the recipient or the recipient controls the supplier, then they will be termed as related party। Similarly, if a common party has at least 25% ownership, though there is no absolute control, but the third party has at least 25% ownership in both the supplier and the recipient, then these suppliers and recipient will be deemed as the related parties। If one of the supplier is the employee of the recipient or vice versa, that is recipient is the employee of the supplier, then these will be deemed as related parties। Similarly, if the supplier and the recipient are already into a partnership deed and they are legally recognized partners, then any deed between them personally will be deemed as a related party transaction because they will be deemed as related parties। And lastly, and as per the act, the firstly, that both are inter employees, that is supplier is working in the company of the recipient and recipient is working in the company of the employee, then both they of them will be deemed as related parties and the transaction will be related party transaction. In all these cases, the transaction value will not be the value of supply. Instead, the value of supply will be calculated as per schedule 4 of the CGST rules. So on this note, we close this session on related party transaction.